Tonight, the Queen is helped by the Duke of Kent and his sister, Princess Alexandra. She's been doing official duties for 50 years.
When Princess Alexandra's private courier arrived at Kensington Palace carrying a velvet-lined case on that quiet Wednesday afternoon, no one could have predicted the firestorm that was about to engulf the royal family. Inside that case were jewels that had belonged to the Queen Mother herself, pieces so significant that their transfer would expose divisions within the monarchy that had been carefully hidden for years. And the person who was supposed to receive them, Queen Camilla, had been completely bypassed. What Princess Alexandra had done and why she chose this exact moment to honor decades-old instructions by giving everything to Catherine while deliberately excluding Camilla would ignite tensions that nobody saw coming. The decision was pointed, personal, and about to change everything. Catherine had been reviewing her schedule for the upcoming week when her private secretary knocked softly and entered carrying an ornate wooden box. The kind of box used to transport items of extraordinary value. Items that had survived generations and carried weight far beyond their monetary worth. "This just arrived for you, ma'am," the secretary said, setting it carefully on Catherine's desk. From Princess Alexandra. Catherine looked up, surprised. She and Alexandra had a warm relationship, built on mutual respect and occasional private conversations about the challenges of royal life. But unexpected deliveries were unusual. Alexandra was methodical, someone who planned things carefully and rarely acted on impulse. Catherine thanked her secretary and waited until she was alone before opening the case. When she lifted the lid, her breath caught. Nestled against midnight blue velvet were pieces of jewelry that made her heart race. A sapphire and diamond brooch that seemed to capture light and hold it. Pearl earrings of such luminous beauty that they appeared almost alive. An emerald bracelet with gold work so intricate it looked like lace frozen in metal. And most striking of all, a tiara. Not one of the grand, imposing pieces from the crown collection, but something more personal, more intimate. The diamonds were set in a delicate lattice pattern that seemed both fragile and eternal, catching the afternoon light streaming through her office windows and scattering it across the walls in dancing points of brilliance. Catherine picked up the envelope that lay on top of the jewelry, her name written in Alexandra's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written on thick cream paper. Catherine began to read, and with each paragraph, the significance of what she held in her hands became clearer and more overwhelming. "My dear Catherine," the letter began, "the pieces you now hold have come to me through a path that began long before you entered this family. Yet I believe they were always meant to find their way to you." Alexandra explained that these items had belonged to the Queen Mother, given to her privately in the years before her death.
The Queen Mother has died peacefully at the age of 101.
They were not part of the official crown collection, not subject to the protocols and hierarchies that governed most royal jewels. They were personal gifts, transferred quietly between women who understood what it meant to serve the monarchy with grace and without complaint. "Aunt Elizabeth gave these to me with very specific instructions," Alexandra wrote. "She told me they were to go, eventually, to someone who embodied the qualities she valued most in royal service. Someone who understood that being royal was about duty rather than status, about connecting with ordinary people rather than maintaining aristocratic distance, about sacrifice rather than privilege." The letter described each piece in loving detail. The sapphire brooch had been a favorite of the Queen Mother's, worn to countless engagements over her long life. She had received it as a gift from King George VI early in their marriage, and it had become something of a talisman for her. The pearl earrings had belonged to Queen Mary before passing to the Queen Mother, carrying a lineage that stretched back to the Victorian era. The emerald bracelet had been purchased by the Queen Mother herself during a visit to India, representing her own taste and choices rather than inherited tradition. And the tiara. The tiara had the most interesting history of all. It had come to the Queen Mother through her own family, the Bowes-Lyons, before she married into the Windsors. It was entirely her personal property, never absorbed into the crown collection. She had worn it to important family occasions rather than state events, making it a symbol of private rather than public royal life.
The Queen Mother was a true guardian of royal heirlooms.
She told me that these pieces should go to someone who understood what she understood. Alexandra's letter continued. That being queen wasn't about wearing crowns or living in palaces. It was about standing with your people during their darkest hours, about staying in London during the Blitz when you could have fled to safety, about visiting hospitals and bombed neighborhoods and showing people that royalty meant something more than ceremonial pageantry. Catherine read the words twice, feeling the weight of comparison. The Queen Mother had lived through war and loss, had seen the monarchy face existential threats, and emerge stronger. Catherine's challenges were different, but the underlying principles were the same. Serve without complaint, adapt without losing your core values, protect your family while honoring the institution, make people believe that monarchy still mattered in a modern world. I've watched you for years now, Alexandra wrote. I've seen how you have handled scrutiny that would have broken lesser people, how you have modernized your approach while respecting traditions that matter, how you have prioritized your children while never shirking your duties, how you have endured criticism and doubt without ever losing your composure or dignity. Aunt Elizabeth would have loved you, Catherine. She would have seen in you exactly what I see, someone who understands that this life is not about what you receive, but about what you give. And that is why these pieces belong to you. Catherine set down the letter, her hands shaking slightly. She looked again at the jewelry, seeing it now not just as beautiful objects, but as a message, a validation from someone whose opinion carried enormous weight. Princess Alexandra had served the royal family for over 70 years, had watched monarchs and prime ministers come and go, had seen scandals and triumphs unfold with the perspective that only decades of service could provide. And she had chosen Catherine to receive these pieces, had deliberately honored what she believed were the Queen Mother's wishes by giving them to her. But even as Catherine felt honored and moved by the gesture, she also recognized the immediate problem it created. These pieces had belonged to the Queen Mother. They should, by traditional logic, have gone to Queen Camilla. She was the current queen consort.
After many years of service to the crown, it seems that the former Camilla Parker Bowles turned Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall,
The person who now held the position the Queen Mother once held. By all conventional understanding of royal hierarchy, items associated with previous queens should pass to current queens. That Alexandra had bypassed Camilla entirely, had given these pieces to Catherine instead, was not just generous, it was a statement, a judgment about who was more worthy, who better embodied the values the Queen Mother had represented. And that judgment, once it became known, was going to cause enormous problems. Catherine sat alone in her study for over an hour, turning the jewelry over in her hands and trying to decide what to do. Her first instinct was to contact Alexandra immediately, to thank her warmly while gently explaining that she could not accept gifts that might cause family discord. But even as she rehearsed that conversation in her mind, Catherine knew it would deeply hurt Alexandra. This was not an impulsive gesture. Alexandra had clearly thought about this for a long time, had honored what she believed were specific instructions from the Queen Mother. Refusing the gift would be rejecting not just jewelry, but the confidence and approval that came with it. It would be telling Alexandra that her judgment was wrong, that her understanding of the Queen Mother's wishes didn't matter. Catherine decided she needed to talk to William before making any decisions. She carefully returned the jewelry to its case and set it aside, then tried to focus on her other work, but concentration was impossible. Her mind kept returning to the sapphires and pearls and diamonds, to Alexandra's letter, to the impossible situation she now found herself in. When William arrived home that evening, Catherine brought him to her study and showed him everything: the box, the jewelry, the letter. She watched his face as he read Alexandra's words, saw his expression shift from curiosity to understanding to concern. "She's right about you," William said when he finished reading. "These should be yours. You've earned them in every way that matters." "But Camilla," Catherine said, "these belong to the Queen Mother. Camilla is queen consort now. She's going to see this as a deliberate slight." William was quiet for a long moment. He picked up the tiara, examining its craftsmanship in the lamplight. "Alexandra had the right to give these to whomever she chose," he said finally. "They were gifts to her, not part of the crown collection. Legally and ethically, she can do what she wants with them." "Legal and ethical aren't the same as wise," Catherine replied. "Once people know about this, Once Camilla knows, it's going to create exactly the kind of tension and speculation we've spent years trying to avoid. They talked late into the night, exploring every option. They could accept the gift, but never wear the pieces publicly, keeping them as a private treasure that wouldn't draw attention. They could tell Camilla directly before word leaked through other channels, framing it as Alexandra's autonomous decision that reflected her relationship with the Queen Mother, rather than any contemporary judgment. They could even suggest that some pieces be placed in the royal collection, rather than kept personally, though that would partially undermine Alexandra's intentions. Every option had drawbacks. Every choice created complications. And ultimately, they both knew that the decision might be taken out of their hands entirely by circumstances they couldn't control. Those circumstances arrived faster than either of them expected. Within 48 hours of the package's arrival, whispers began circulating through the palace networks that connected Kensington, Buckingham, and Clarence House. A staff member who had processed the delivery mentioned it casually to a colleague, unaware of what it contained or why it mattered. That colleague told someone else. Within hours, the basic facts had reached ears that found them very interesting indeed. By the end of the week, people throughout the royal household were quietly discussing Catherine's mysterious package from Princess Alexandra. The speculation grew more specific with each retelling. Some said it was documents, others guessed it was artwork. A few, based on nothing but intuition and knowledge of what Alexandra might possess, speculated it might be jewelry. Those whispers eventually reached someone who mentioned them to a journalist with excellent palace sources, and suddenly, Catherine and William were fielding inquiries about a gift they had hoped to keep private. Catherine made the difficult decision to be proactive. She called Alexandra, thanked her again for the extraordinary gift, and explained that the story was about to break publicly. "I want to honor your wishes and keep these pieces," Catherine said carefully. "But I need to know if you're comfortable with me releasing a statement that explains the history and your reasoning. Otherwise, the story will be written by people who don't know the truth and will make it into something ugly." Alexandra's response was immediate and firm. "I have nothing to hide, my dear. I'm proud to have given them to you. If the truth causes discomfort for some people, perhaps that discomfort is deserved. Say whatever you need to say." With Alexandra's blessing, Catherine worked with the palace communications team to draft a statement. They labored over every word, trying to strike the impossible balance between honesty and discretion. The final version acknowledged that Catherine had received jewelry from Princess Alexandra that had previously belonged to the Queen Mother. It explained these were personal items that Alexandra had received as private gifts, giving her the right to dispose of them as she wished. It noted that Alexandra had chosen to give them to Catherine in recognition of her dedication to royal service and her embodiment of values the Queen Mother had championed. The statement ended with Catherine's gratitude for the generous and meaningful gesture. What the statement deliberately avoided was any mention of Camilla or any explanation of why she had been bypassed. That omission was strategic, intended to keep focus on the positive gesture rather than on questions of who'd been excluded. But of course, everyone reading the statement would immediately notice what wasn't said. The absence of Camilla's name would be as significant as anything that was included. Queen Camilla learned about the jewelry the same way much of the public did. She was at Clarence House, having tea with several longtime friends, when her phone began vibrating with messages. People were sending her links to articles with headlines like "Princess Alexandra, Gifts, Queen Mother's Private Collection to Catherine," and "Rare Royal Jewels Skip Queen Camilla, Go to Princess of Wales." Camilla's first reaction was confusion. She set down her teacup and began reading, trying to understand what had happened. She had not known such a collection existed in Alexandra's possession, had not realized the Queen Mother had distributed personal pieces outside official channels. As the full significance became clear, as she understood that items associated with the Queen Mother had been given to Catherine rather than to her, confusion gave way to something else. Hurt. Deep, genuine hurt that cut through her usually impeccable composure. The hurt came from multiple sources. First, the implicit message that she was not worthy of items connected to previous queens. That despite being queen consort herself, despite years of service and sacrifice, she was somehow less deserving than Catherine. Second, the public nature of it. Learning through news reports, rather than through private family communication, felt like a deliberate humiliation. Whether or not she had any legal claim to the jewelry, the courtesy of advance notice would have been appreciated. Her friends, trying to be supportive, only made things worse. "It's clearly a snub," Lady Lansdowne said firmly. "Alexandra must have known how this would be perceived, and for Catherine to accept it, knowing you'd be hurt, she probably pushed for it," another friend added. "Catherine's always been so careful about her image. This makes her look like the Queen Mother's true heir while you're just forgotten." These comments, however well-intentioned, fed Camilla's sense of grievance. By the time King Charles returned to Clarence House that evening, Camilla had worked herself into a state of genuine anger. She felt blindsided, disrespected, and diminished, and she wanted her husband to acknowledge that what had happened was wrong. Charles found himself in an impossible position. He understood his wife's hurt feelings, could see how the situation must feel like a rejection, but he also recognized that Alexandra had acted within her rights. These were her personal possessions to give as she wished. Catherine had done nothing wrong by accepting a gift from a senior family member. There was no villain here, just an unfortunate situation that exposed underlying tensions about status and worth. He tried to explain this to Camilla gently. The pieces were Alexandra's personal property, he said. She had every right to give them to whomever she chose. It doesn't reflect on you or your position. "Doesn't reflect on me?" Camilla's voice rose. "Charles, these were the Queen Mother's jewels. I am Queen Consort now. By every traditional understanding, items associated with previous queens should come to me. Instead, they go to Catherine, and I learn about it from the bloody newspapers." The argument that followed was one of the most serious of their marriage. Camilla accused Charles of always prioritizing William and Catherine while dismissing her legitimate concerns. Charles countered that she was making this about herself, when it was really about honoring the Queen Mother's wishes as interpreted by Alexandra. Camilla shot back that the Queen Mother's wishes, if they truly existed, were decades old and couldn't possibly account for current realities about who actually held the position of queen. They went in circles for over an hour, both entrenched in their positions, neither willing to concede ground. The conversation ended with Camilla leaving the room in tears, and Charles, frustrated and exhausted, pouring himself a very large whiskey. The next morning, Charles called William. Father and son had a careful conversation about managing the fallout. "Your stepmother is very hurt," Charles said. "I understand her feelings. Even if I don't think anyone actually did anything wrong, it would help if Catherine could reach out directly, woman to woman, to smooth things over." William was silent for a moment. "Catherine didn't create this situation," he said finally. "She received an unsolicited gift from Alexandra. Refusing it would have been insulting. What exactly is she supposed to apologize for?" "I'm not asking for an apology," Charles said carefully. "Just a conversation, an acknowledgement that the situation is difficult for Camilla. Sometimes the gesture matters more than the substance." William discussed it with Catherine that evening. She was reluctant, uncomfortable with the idea of reaching out when she genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. But she also understood that family harmony mattered, that ongoing tension between her and Camilla would create problems for everyone. "I'll call her," Catherine said finally, "but I'm not going to apologize for accepting a gift I had every right to receive. I'll acknowledge her feelings, but I won't concede that anything inappropriate happened." The phone call the next day was strained and awkward. Catherine began carefully, saying she understood the situation must have been surprising and that she hoped Camilla knew there had been no intention to cause hurt. She explained that the gift had come unexpectedly, that she had been as surprised as anyone. Camilla's response was cool and controlled. "I appreciate you calling," she said, "but I think you must have known how this would look, how it would feel for me to see news reports about you receiving the Queen Mother's private collection. Some advance warning might have been courteous." Catherine took a breath. "I received the gift only days before the story broke," she said gently. "There wasn't time to navigate all the sensitivities before circumstances forced our hand. I'm sorry you were hurt. That was never the intention." "Intention doesn't always matter," Camilla replied. "Sometimes the impact is what counts. And the impact here is that I, the Queen Consort, was bypassed for items that traditionally should have come to me. That sends a message, Catherine, whether you intended it or not." The conversation continued for several more minutes, both women maintaining careful politeness while making their positions clear. Catherine emphasized that she had simply accepted a gift from a senior family member, that Alexandra had made her own decision based on her own relationship with the Queen Mother. Camilla maintained that more consideration should have been given to how this would affect her and what it would signal about the family's priorities. They ended the call without resolution. Both had said what needed to be said, but the underlying tension remained. If anything, having it spoken aloud had made the division more concrete rather than healing it. The story dominated royal coverage for weeks. Opinion pieces analyzed every angle, dissected relationships, and speculated about future implications. The public response was sharply divided, reflecting broader divisions about how people viewed different members of the royal family. Those who admired Catherine saw the gift as appropriate recognition of her dedication, proof that the older generation appreciated her service. Those who supported Camilla saw it as a slight that revealed ongoing bias against the Queen Consort, evidence that she would never be fully accepted. Royal commentators filled hours of broadcast time discussing the nuances. Some argued that Catherine represented the future of the monarchy, while Camilla's time was necessarily limited by age, making it strategically sensible to give significant pieces to someone who would wear them for decades. Others insisted that protocol and hierarchy mattered, that the current Queen Consort should have priority regardless of personal merit or long-term calculations. Social media was predictably brutal. Hashtags supporting various positions trended for days. Team Catherine versus Team Camilla became shorthand for larger debates about whether monarchy should be based on tradition or merit, on hereditary status or earned respect. Memes proliferated. Comment sections became battlegrounds. The jewelry, given as a private gesture of confidence, had become a symbol that different factions used to advance their preferred narratives about the royal family's future. Catherine tried to ignore the noise, focusing on her work and the responsibilities that actually mattered. She attended events, met with charities, visited schools and hospitals. She did the work of being Princess of Wales while the debate raged around her, but it was exhausting, being at the center of controversy she hadn't sought and couldn't control. William was protective and frustrated, pushing palace officials to defend his wife from unfair attacks. Some were willing to do this. Others were more cautious, not wanting to appear to take sides in what was increasingly being framed as a contest between Catherine and Camilla. The reluctance to fully support Catherine angered William, but he also understood the political calculations at play. Palace officials served the institution first, and sometimes that meant not backing any individual too strongly. Princess Alexandra watched the firestorm with growing distress. She had expected some interest in her decision, but had not anticipated it becoming such a cultural flashpoint. She considered releasing a statement to clarify her intentions, but her advisors convinced her that anything she said now would only provide more fuel for people already committed to their positions. 6 months after the initial gift, the intensity of public controversy had finally begun to diminish, but the private impact continued rippling through the family. Relationships had been tested, and in some cases, permanently altered. Catherine and Camilla maintained a cordial but distant relationship. They spoke when necessary at family events, smiled for photographs, maintained the appearance of unity. But the warmth that had existed between them before, never deep but at least genuine, was gone. Both were professional enough to hide this from cameras, but those who knew them could see the change in how they interacted, or more accurately, how they carefully avoided interacting more than required. Within palace circles, the controversy had revealed fault lines that had existed beneath the surface but had been carefully papered over. There were clear camps now, people loyal to William and Catherine, others aligned with Charles and Camilla. These divisions influenced decisions about staffing, about resource allocation, about who received what kind of institutional support. The fractures weren't open warfare, but they created inefficiencies and tensions that made palace operations less smooth than they should have been. King Charles attempted to address these divisions through a series of private family meetings. The conversations were difficult and sometimes heated, touching on grievances that went far beyond jewelry. Camilla spoke about feeling constantly compared unfavorably to Diana, and now to Catherine, about never being fully accepted despite years of service. Catherine discussed the pressure of constantly having to prove herself worthy, of being scrutinized for every decision and criticized regardless of what she chose. These meetings were painful but also somewhat cathartic. Simply acknowledging tensions that everyone had been pretending didn't exist created space for them to be managed more constructively. Charles emerged with a clearer understanding of the challenges different family members faced and a renewed commitment to being fairer in balancing competing needs. He couldn't solve all the problems or make everyone feel equally valued, but he could try to be more aware and responsive. It was a start, if an imperfect one. The jewelry itself remained in Catherine's possession, carefully stored and occasionally worn to events where its appearance felt appropriate and meaningful. Each time Catherine wore one of the pieces, particularly the tiara, she thought about the Queen Mother, about Alexandra's faith in her, about the standards she was being trusted to uphold. The pieces had become more than beautiful objects. They were reminders of a legacy she was expected to honor, of values she was meant to embody, and Catherine took that responsibility seriously, using them as motivation to ensure her conduct and service lived up to the confidence that had been placed in her. Years later, when historians examined this period of the monarchy, the jewelry incident would be cited as revealing the tensions inherent in an institution, trying to modernize while respecting tradition, trying to honor hierarchy while rewarding merit. The incident itself was relatively minor in the grand scheme of royal history, but it illuminated challenges that the monarchy would continue grappling with as it navigated an uncertain future. Catherine kept Alexandra's letter in a private safe, occasionally rereading it when she needed reminding of why her work mattered and what values she was meant to embody. The Queen Mother's jewelry, beautiful as it was, remained less important to her than the message the gift conveyed. That someone who had served the crown with distinction for decades believed Catherine was worthy of carrying forward a legacy stretching back generations. That vote of confidence, that recognition from someone whose opinion truly mattered, meant more than any physical object ever could. And Catherine tried every day to live up to it, to prove that Alexandra's faith had been well placed, that the Queen Mother's legacy was safe in her hands. What do you think about Princess Alexandra's decision to bypass Camilla entirely? Was this appropriate recognition of Catherine's service or a breach of royal protocol that created unnecessary division? How do you think the Queen Mother herself would have felt about where her jewels ended up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from inside the palace walls. And click the video shown on your screen for another fascinating look at the hidden dynamics shaping the royal family's future.